Hello all, I welcome you back to the next update of weekly current affairs. Today we will be discussing economy related current affairs. There are few topics to discuss. The first topic that we have taken for discussion is about the advanced estimates of GDP. So this GDP is an estimate which projects that for the year 2020-21 the GDP is going to be at 9.2%. So we just need to revise as to how GDP is estimated. As we know, we put our GDP estimates on the basis of quarters. So for every quarter, the NSO or the body responsible for the publishing of GDP figures will be coming out with these numbers, authoritative numbers. For every quarter, the data will be available after 2-month lag. For example, the quarter ending with December 31, the GDP data will be available only in the month of last of February. So 2-month lag will be there. Right now, as of now, we have authoritative statements from the NSO concerning only 2 quarters, that is Q1 and Q2. But if you see, without Q3 and Q4, which is for the full year, how are we going to make certain policy measures? GDP is a very important variable, as you know. Most of the policy measures will be on the basis of how GDP is estimated. In order to estimate GDP in the year 2016-17, the government came out with this measure that even though we have only 2 quarters, in the month of in the year start, in the beginning of the year, that is in the month of January, we need an estimate based on the 2 quarters as to how this year is going to project itself. Based on this, the government will be taking important measures. For example, this GDP estimate that we have made only on the basis of 2 quarters that we have. Right? How do we estimate it? It is on the basis of extrapolation. We take 2 months quarter and we assess the situation and we project that in the coming months also it is going to be. So based on this estimate, the figures is coming out to be 9.2%. With this figure, with this GDP number, what is the significance of this? Because this GDP estimate will be now used by the finance ministry to decide the next financial year's budgetary allocations. So likewise, whatever economic decisions is taken by the government of India, which needs a comparison with that of GDP, we will take this advanced estimates into account. So this is the first advanced estimate. The second advanced estimate will come after the month of March, post which we will have a clubbed together version of the provisional estimates, which is for the full year. Clear? So this is how we are taking things as of now. But the question remains, if we are going to make policy decisions on the basis of this estimate, advanced estimate, how relevant are the numbers as of now? For example, in the first week of January, we have this particular data. With this data, we estimate that growth is going to be 9.2. But we did not foresee that there is going to be a pandemic again, or the third wave, or any other downward risks for the growth of India. So if this is the case, how are we going to rely on this particular data? This is one question. For example, in the last year also, there was advanced estimate. In 2019-20 also there was an advanced estimate. But if you see, most of the advanced estimates failed to rightly project India's growth because it didn't know that it could not foresee that there are pandemic related lockdowns or restraints. Now let's just look at some significance or highlights of these numbers or the findings of the advanced estimate. First of all, have we reached pre-COVID levels? As we know, all the GDP data that we have been getting till now suggests of a V-shaped recovery. This is to be taken with a pinch of salt. It is not in all cases. Now, this V-shaped recovery has been criticized by people, by some critics, that we have not attained a fully V-shaped because the recovery point that we have reached is below pre-COVID times. So right now, after 2 quarters and after the projection of 9.2%, are we reaching pre-COVID levels? The answer is both yes as well as no. If you look at the GDP, and the gross value added, then for the first time after 2020, we are reaching the levels that we attained in 2020. Clear? So this is showing a recovery, or we have reached pre-COVID levels as far as growth is concerned. But we should look at the ingredients of growth and other factors that go into play. For example, private final consumption expenditure, which contributes to nearly 55% of the GDP. How much it is? Let's look at this. See, in 2014-15, it was 59 lakh crores. Now it is 81 lakh crores. But if you see the graph, it is lesser than what it was in 2019-20. So the private final consumption expenditure, or the expenditure that households are making, has not yet reached pre-COVID levels, or we can say that the demand has not reached pre-COVID levels. But other components, for example, the gross fixed capital formation on the investment side, we have reached a recovery, or we have exceeded the pre-COVID levels. What about the government's final consumption expenditure? Well, obviously, it didn't even show a drop, because even during the COVID situation, the government was ramping up its expenditure in order to counter this particular cycle. Clear? What about per capita GDP? So even if you look at per capita GDP, 1.0 lakh, this is the constant levels, which is far less, which is even lower than the pre-COVID levels. So whatever recovery we have been having, let's say in the last 2 years, population has a little bit increased, and a 9.2% increase that we have been showing is not able to increase the altogether per capita GDP of India. And that is reflected here critically in per capita private final consumption. If we look how each an individual person has spent in a particular year, it is only 59,000 rupees, and which is even lower than around 65,000 rupees, which was there in the 2019 levels. So what do we read from this advanced estimate? One, it is pretty sure that if we are going by the number of 9.2% optimistically, then we are going to be the fastest growing economy in the world. Because if you see, China is also projecting to grow at around 8.5 or something. So we have outpaced China in terms of growth. But you should understand that this is not to be seen as a boom for India. It is actually due to the base effect. Because in the previous year, India grew by minus 7.3%. So due to base effect only, the growth seems to be inflated as of now. And there are also some other downside risks, if you could see, especially due to the projection of Omicron. Private consumption has fallen. Inflation pressures are quite high around this point of time. So all this are having a downward bias in terms of GDP. The second topic that we have to discuss is the QAS survey, or the quarterly employment survey. We have a practice called as All India Quarterly Establishment Based Employment Survey, or the AQEES. This survey is undertaken by whom? The Labour Bureau. The Labour Bureau is undertaking this particular survey. There are two components of the survey. The first is the QES, Quarterly Employment Survey. Second is the Area Frame Establishment Survey. This particular survey focuses on the organized sector, which is firms having 10 or more. This Area Frame Establishment Survey is a survey which focuses on the employment side of firms having 9 or less. Right? So this particular two surveys are there. One is related to organized, the other is related to unorganized, and it is undertaken by the Labour Bureau as part of the All India Quarterly. So once we have this data and this data, Combining these two, the Labor Bureau will present annually a figure called as the AQEES. Clear? So what is this QES findings? It came out in the first week of January. And the findings of QES are this. One, the total employment in 9 sectors. Understand that this QES only focuses on an organized sector, which means agriculture is the most predominantly unorganized sector. So we will be excluding agriculture in this particular survey. Clear? So this excludes agriculture. And if you could see, 9 sectors are there, like manufacturing, construction, trade, transport, all these sectors. So in these sectors, the total employment has stood at 3.1 crore, which is actually 2 lakhs higher than the QES1. What is this QES1 or Quarterly Employment Survey 1? This relates to April to June. The second relates to July to September. Right. So we have a figure which relates to July to September 2021. So this is the period where India went for a gradual unlocking of India, and we slowly winded up the lockdowns. Clear? So relaxations were done during this period, economy began to revive, and that is reflected in the form of 2 lakh additional jobs created in the organized sector. And some other important data that it shows, 90% of the establishments are having less than 100 workers. Right? So most of the firms are coming under the micro types. So, but workers are not the classification category for MSMEs, but we can understand that if it is a micro and medium, then obviously it is going to be an industry which employs less than 100. Clear? What about the female workers? The female workers were 32.1% of the total workforce, which is significantly higher than the first quarter, which was 29.3. So labor force participation of women has also marginally increased. Now sector-wise data. So out of these 9 segments or the sectors, which has given or contributed to the most amount of employment, it is the manufacturing sector. We are talking about only the organized, and out of organized, it is the manufacturing sector which has given a lot of lot of employment. Next comes education. Gender wise, obviously it was 32 for females. Now if you look at these table 2.11, the self-employed, if you see India's labor situation, it is the self-employed which is quite high. In India, I think near to 50% of employment comes from self-employed. Clear? So, but in this unorganized sector, self-employment is very less. It's just 2%, and also casual employees are 2.1%. And regular means ordinary people who have a security of tenure, and regular staffs, they contribute to nearly 87% of the people working in organized sectors. The contractual employees are 8.3 and the fixed term employees are 0.6. This term has been gaining currency, especially with the advent of the industrial standing order of the government as well as the labor codes of the last year. This has given legitimacy to FTE or fixed term employment. This is a little bit different from contractual employee. And if you see skill or job training, establishments providing on-the-job training, health segment provides 36% of nearly out of the 100 workers employed in the health, 36 of them have reported to have got on-the-job training. The overall numbers for India is 24.3, and the lowest is seen in the transport and accommodation and restaurants. So what does this number show? This shows that even in the organized sector, skill development is quite low in India. Now all these are highlights of the QES. QES is part of the Labor Bureau's employment survey, but we have another statistics which is related to employment, and that is called as the PLFS, Periodic Labor Force Survey. what is the difference between PLFS and the QES? Understand, who is responsible for the PLFS? It is not the Labor Bureau, it is the NSO or the Ministry of Statistics and Planning. So they are responsible for the PLFS. And also the major difference, why do we have these two components in place, is the QES or the AQES relates to the demand side of labor. It relates to the demand side of labor. This PLFS is a survey which is a household survey. The main difference is that a QES is a establishment based survey. So you will go to the firm and you will ask a series of questions as to how many people have been employed. But PLFS is a household survey. You will visit houses and ask how much of you have been employed on the basis of usual subsidiary status and other status. Clear? So QES talks about the demand side of the labor and PLFS talks about the supply of labor. How many people are willing to be part of the labor force is answered by PLFS. So both of these two numbers or the statistics are important to get a holistic picture of India's labor scenario. The third topic of discussion is about India-UK free trade agreement. So what is a free trade agreement? Of course, a free trade agreement can be bilateral or multilateral based on how many countries come together. So when India-UK is a bilateral free trade agreement. So usually in a free trade agreement or a policy, we will be trying to bring down tariffs, quotas, subsidies and all other prohibitions or any prohibitions which inhibit the exchange of goods and services or trade between the concerned states or the concerned countries. Okay, so India and UK has started a dialogue. There has been authoritatively a statement from both governments that we have started a dialogue which will be going on till 2022. So by the end of 2022, we aspire to reach a conclusion. This is a statement. And before that dialogue process is over, we need to have an interim agreement. We need to have an interim agreement. So what is this interim agreement? So before the conclusions are done, before the dialogue is concluded, we need an interim agreement. For example, by March 2022, the government feels that we should strike a interim agreement and then we could wait for a comprehensive agreement. So a comprehensive agreement means it will cover all things related to goods, services and human resources and everything. And in this period, they've also decided to avoid any sensitive issues in the negotiations. If you take the case of UK, as of now, the total exports to UK is 8.5 billion, which is we are exporting worth 8.5 billion and importing 4.9 billion, which means here in the relation between the trade relation between India and UK, India is having a trade surplus. India is having a trade surplus. Both of the countries have set a goal last year to double the bilateral trade to nearly 5 lakh crores. Right? So right now it is around 1 lakh crores or something. By 2030, they have decided to increase the entire amount to 5 lakh crores. So this includes all these commodities. They have talked about all these commodities where duty cuts are possible. So both India as well as UK will now agree to cut the tariff lines on several items. Clear? So here India also specifically wants mobility for its professionals. Right? It wants smooth flow of people from one end to the other. And we talked about an interim agreement, isn't it? So whenever India has an FTA agreement, whenever a dialogue process is happening, this dialogue process will sometimes take years to realize. So before this before the talks are concluded, we will put forth an interim measure, an ad hoc measure, and that is called in our parlance as an early harvest agreement, EHA. So what is this? It acts as a front runner to a more comprehensive FTA. So it acts as a precursor to the free trade agreement. But if we take the case of India, most of the agreements that we have, before reaching the full FTA, it is stuck in the phase of the early harvest agreement. Why is this happening? First, one of the reasons is that whenever we talk about an interim arrangement, before we conclude all the sensitive issues, we mainly target easy issues or issues which will not lead to any kind of lengthening of the dialogue, right? Extension of the dialogue process. So whatever is low hanging fruits, we will target them and make a deal. So this is quite easy, right? So we put in place, let's say 100 commodities are to be targeted, 30 easy commodities we will choose and put it in the early harvest agreement. So the tougher goods, we will leave it for later. Most of the time, this process is leading to inordinate delay. We are never able to conclude the FTA by this. So mostly the free trade agreement are hanging at the stage of early harvest agreements. For example, if we take the case of Thailand, India, we negotiated an early harvest agreement in the year 2004. And it has been a long pending issue between Sri Lanka and Australia as well. So everything has been at the EHA stage. It has not translated into comprehensive dialogue or the realization of the FTA. Experts point out that one of the reasons why no FTA is concluded within the deadline is because of this particular process called as the early harvest agreement. Rather than having a small set of criteria, you have to conclude the entire deal altogether. No need to have this early harvest agreement at all. So deal with the whole picture, not in bits and pieces. For example, let's say the automobile tariff cuts that we made in the early harvest agreement in Thailand gave them a trade advantage for which they are okay with the early harvest agreement, and India is not able to negotiate a deal with Thailand for a comprehensive free trade agreement. It is not giving them any incentive to work toward a full FTA because already they have gained the advantage of lowering automobile tariffs in India. India EU BTIA, we have a bilateral trade agreement with the EU called as the BTIA. This BTIA was revived after 6 years. So we dropped the agreement, then 6 years later EU has come forward to negotiate a deal again. This particular time they have agreed, both these concerned parties have agreed that we will no longer stick to any early harvest agreement, but we will comprehensively cover the BTIA instead. So we will look at the whole picture and try to deal with the BTIA rather than having an interim agreement. So as of now, India presently has 10 free trade agreements and 6 preferential trade agreements. India is also on the process of negotiating more and more deals, especially with Australia in the form of a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. All these things are taking place. India is also set on to take a review of the existing FTAs. With South Korea we have, Japan we have, ASEAN we have, but all these FTAs have to be reviewed again, because if we take the case of most of the trade relation between these countries, India is on the disadvantageous side. So India is having a trade deficit of all these countries, and that is why India did not go ahead with the RCEP, because it feared that the trade deficit of India will widen more. The final topic that we are going to discuss today is related to India challenging the WTO verdict on sugar. So this happened in the month of December itself, but this was an article which came in the Hindu very recently. So what is this about? Let's just understand the context. So issues related to India's sugar subsidy. In the year 2019, Australia, Brazil and Guatemala, they are filing a dispute against India's sugar subsidies. On what accounts? What kind of allegations that they put in India? One, the major contention is that the export subsidy of India export related subsidies, production related assistance through various schemes and programs, and the buffer stock policy of India is against the AOA, Agreement on Agriculture. So, Agreement on Agriculture is a component of WTO whereby we have the de minimis program. That is, developed countries are required 5% of subsidies or support schemes they can give, and developing countries can give up to a maximum of only 10%. So, this is the requirements here. So, what about these provisions have been violated by India because of these particular schemes? Is one such dispute put against India. The second is that under the subsidies and countervailing measures, this is another measure where we talk about the prohibited subsidies and how countervailing measures should be done, how parity should be achieved, how equal preferential treatment should not be happen. All these details are there in the SCM agreement. So, SCM agreement, every year the government of India has to disclose its support program to the WTO. India has failed to notify how much support it is giving to the WTO body. So, it has violated the SCM agreement as well. So, on these two counts only, in 2019, a dispute resolution was put against India, especially against India's sugar subsidies. So, what happened right now, why is it in the news, is that the WTO ruled that India has indeed violated the rules. WTO rules has been violated, and that the sugar subsidies given by India is excessive of the de minimis provision of the Agreement on Agriculture. And therefore, India is specifically giving subsidies and export related subsidies to sugar and sugarcane, which will distort the price or give undue advantage to certain products, undue advantage to sugar and sugarcane in India for its exports. So, whether India's support is product specific or not, this is the main question that they dealt with. For example, India, when it comes to sugar subsidy, it comes in the form of FRP. What is FRP? Fair and remunerative prices, which is a kind of MSP which is issued for the procurement of sugar cane. Now the question remains, India is arguing that the FRP program that it gives is not its own procurement program. Unlike MSP, where the government procures the commodity from the people, from the farmers for that particular price, FRP is the price at which the mill owners need to pay. So, we are not directly procuring. So, this is not a kind of a direct support, is the argument put by India, but this has been rejected by the WTO that it is indeed product specific. So, every support that you are giving in the form of FRP is indeed affecting the product prices. Okay. Now, what happens when we have these kind of disputes? This is not the first time that countries have taken us to the WTO Dispute Settlement Board. Even before that, in the year 2019-20 also, for our rice subsidies, countries took us to the WTO. But here also, we have an important clause called the peace clause. What is this peace clause? For example, when the WTO came into effect, the countries decided that for the programs, for the support programs that it has, for the subsidy programs or any other support that it gives for its agriculture products, there will be a relaxation, which means the Agreement on Agriculture, the SCM, whenever these provisions are breached or violated, they will not be taken to the dispute settlement for till 2004. After 2004, countries were now free to take all the countries to the dispute settlement board with the argument that these countries have violated the principles. And it is only after this that many of the countries began to slap cases against India. Now, after negotiations in the year 2013, Bali Ministerial, the WTO agreed for a temporary peace clause, which means this peace clause gives an exemption to developing countries to continue with its food security programs. For example, India's food security program, the National Food Security Act, provides that it will undertake certain operations, and it is obviously 10% more and violates the agreement on agriculture. But no country can take India to task or put a case against India on the basis of this, because there is a peace clause. So India can have recourse to peace clause, but can it do the same in this sugar? The answer is a little bit complicated, in the sense India says that it will again ask for waiver through the peace clause that it has under the WTO, but other countries will obviously have their own provisions and they will extend the litigation process. So what next? What next? What to expect? The WTO appellate tribunal is there. So India has said that whatever the tribunal or the dispute settlement board has ruled right now against India, India will appeal it in the appellate tribunal. But there are certain members in the appellate tribunal, but most of the members of the seats are vacant because USA has been exercising this right and been thwarting any efforts to fill this dispute settlement board or the appellate tribunal. And that is why India will now take the case to the appellate tribunal, but appellate tribunal will not be in a position to give a verdict because it is not having the sufficient quorum. So what will happen? The case is still pending. So until the case is decided by the WTO appellate tribunal, the status quo or the present situation will continue. But does this give a permanent relief to India? No. India needs to negotiate hard on its behalf and strike a deal within the WTO in the next ministerial. For example, the previous ministerial was to happen in 2020. It did not happen because of COVID. In 2020-21, it has been postponed to an indefinite date. So by the next WTO ministerial, India needs to stick to its stand and get a deal that is advantageous for its own national programs. So until further discussions are coming in this space, we will wait and see. So with this, we are concluding this current affairs session. Thank you. This is Mohan, and we will see you in the next video.